All right, we're here from this man's basement. This man is Sceadeau. He is one of the top Agricola players in the world. He is one of the leaders of the East Coast Agricola groups, and the leading laurelist in WBC Agricola. Is that a thing?
That is a thing, right?
Okay.
Yeah, laurel is what you get when you win or place at Agricola at WBC, and I've been playing a long time, so I have the most of them.
Yes, and I'm very fortunate and honored to be part of your event this year. And thank you very much for inviting me, and I had a blast.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, Farmageddon is what Lumin's talking about. This thing is basically, it started accidentally with a couple of friends, basically from the day after Christmas to the day before people are supposed to go to work. I have people come here from as far as Helsinki. Hi, Daniel. As far as Helsinki, basically, to come here and play and workshop Agricola. It was nothing but Agricola for a while. We've got some people that like other things. We let them play them, but we shame them. We try to shame them as best we can. Yeah.
So one of the really cool things that you've done with Farmageddon is that you get gamers who like games but might not have Agricola as their favorite game, and you have a lot of ways to make people like Agricola more.
That's true. Well, Agricola is the best game, right? I think anyone watching this can agree that objectively it's the best game.
Well, do you want to list off like a couple reasons for that, just to?
Oh, why it's the best game?
Yeah.
Sure. So the reason why I like it, the replayability is amazing, right? So basically, everyone has after the draft an asynchronous start. It looks like it's synchronous because everyone has all the same resources, but basically what you've got in your hand is going to be very different and force you to play differently each and every game because of the combination, not only what you have, but what your opponents have. So it's a game of long-term strategy smashing up against short-term tactics,
right,
and having to make those decisions every single turn, right? Every single turn, you're like, am I going to stay on target or am I going to get distracted by the shinies?
Yeah.
And you have to decide if you're getting distracted by the shinies, what are you going to do with that? Or if you're going to stay on target, what are you giving everybody else? So I think it's a game that if you're good at every game. Right, because all the skills that you learn, everything that you learn about Agricola while playing Agricola, can apply elsewhere. So I just think the game is just really good.
Yeah, and now to get a bit more like Agricola specific, you've done a couple things with this specific Farmageddon, I think, to make it even more friendly to less expert players, if we're to call it something like that.
Sure.
So one of the things is that our entire Farmageddon was played with the revised edition of Agricola. We didn't touch an EIK set once, which was pretty surprising to me.
We've got 4 sets of EIK sitting on the wall, untouched. No one wanted it. Yeah. So the revised edition of Agricola, people have a lot of different kind of understandings of, right? Some people only played at the base. And the base revised Agricola, the 4-player Agricola with just a few cards, is super food friendly, right? So like it's designed to let new players play and not feel the same kind of gut-wrenching, how am I going to feed that we did when we learned the game.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a lot of people's early impressions, although with the new sets, it's less of that.
Right, and the amount of combos that you can create out of just those 96 Ox and Miners combined is way more than most small 100-card sets of combos. So
yes, absolutely.
Anybody can find a combo, and it's fun to, as in your words, push buttons. Which,
yes.
And one of the things I really appreciate about the words you use while playing these games is you make it really easy to understand and have fun doing it.
Point containers.
Yes. What is a point container? We'll get to that later, I think.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing you do with the revised edition is that you use an optional spot. The revised edition in its box comes with 3 or 4 optional extra action spaces you can throw into your game. And Sceadeau has found that using the 3 to 4 player extra action space, which provides you a guaranteed growth spot in round 5, makes the game a lot friendlier to people who don't play as much.
Right. So the room queue, the whole what am I doing with rounds 5 to 7, again, getting very Agricola specific here, is hard for new players to grasp, right? So without that spot, they will often fall behind and then fall very behind.
Yes.
So that spot offers 2 different things, right? Not only does it offer alleviation of the growth queue, it also offers additional food, right?
Yes.
Additional food, additional animals. You can do more farming just by having that spot in the game. It turns on some cards that might not specifically be designed to be turned on so quickly.
Yes.
But in general makes the game easier and more accessible. And I want more people playing Agricola, and I want people to have fun playing Agricola. And I think that that spot allows for people to have who have a looser game, who are less skilled, to be able to get in there and at least start enjoy playing.
Sure, sure. Once I heard that this is what you did, I was a bit concerned for my own sake, because when Sceadeau mentions that it turns some cards on a lot quicker than usual, it also turns some cards off, and I was a bit sad about that.
That much is true. So a lot of the cards it turns off actually are like B deck cards that I hadn't even seen yet.
Okay.
So like I didn't know anything about B deck because you guys have been playing it on Play Agricola forever, and I haven't touched Play Agricola in a long time. So I saw some of those cards. I was like, oh yeah, I could see how that turns it off. Although watching you play Childless with the Zoo spot is actually kind of funny, because normally you're going to be playing Childless and you're going to wait for your chance to grow, and then you're going to grow.
Yeah.
When you play with that spot, you have to make your own determination when you're going to grow. You can grow at any time.
Yes.
When am I going to do it? So that's actually an interesting consideration, right? Because you can grow at any time. Now you're like, I think I still want grain and food.
Yeah, so I played Childless twice this week, and the first time I didn't decide correctly. The second time I did decide correctly, but it was definitely a very unusual spot to be in compared to my normal Agricola experiences.
Right. Childless, by the way, if you have more rooms than people and you have no more than 2 people, you get a crop and a food each round.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you delay your growth, you get basically the actions made up for, because you're taking crops and food with those actions, and it can set you up for a really nice mid-game if you've planned other things correctly.
Yeah, absolutely. It gives you points to put in your point containers.
Yes. So I guess we might as well explain this now that you've dropped the term twice.
Yes.
So a lot of beginning and intermediate players won't grasp fully how they get to above 40 or 45 points in a game. And we know now, after many plays, that the way you get points is to drop your fields and pastures and put things in them. Hence the term point containers, which are fields and pastures, and the things that go in the point containers are the crops and animals.
Right. And they will grow, right? As long as you do it right and your timing is good, they will get in there and they will grow. Yeah. And that's really important. The way I heard Agricola described, years ago when I won EuroQuest, it was Alex Bobet who was like, oh yeah, no, I only build fences in round 14, right? I just want a Renault fence. Mm-hmm. And like, sure, that's Renault and cover spaces, but that's not get points.
Yeah.
Because you want to get those, and you want to get what we've always called breeding pairs, right? You want a pair of animals. And by taking the pair of animals to earn you points, you're also taking food off the table from the people who are starving just trying to grow to 5. Right? They're just growing to 5 and they're hoping just to pick up the animals and eat them.
Because that's how their home games usually go.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And you can really disrupt that. And we found it to be very disruptive too, right? So I played many finals, and one of the finals, one of the players is just used to doing that, and he explained after the game he's just used to doing that and then just picking up like 3 boar and eating them as he's growing to 5 and not worrying about all the things.
Yeah.
Right? But he's playing 3 people that had played here and were very much used to looking for and timing the 2 animal grabs, right?
Sure.
Like, oh, there's 1 of each animal type. I'm fencing this turn.
Yes.
And I'm going to pick up at least a pair or 2 of breeding pairs. Mm-hmm. And when that happened to him, he had 5 people, he had 5 rooms, everyone else was at 3. He thought things were going great, and he looked around, he had no food. No food.
Whoops.
Right. And everyone else had points. So, yeah. So it's a combination of starving other people while progressing your game, which is really a great thing to do.
Yeah. Okay, so just took a second there to adjust our camera a bit. So we were talking, I think, about... What were we talking about?
We were talking about starving the table and getting our own points and putting them in point containers.
Yeah, those are things you should do. That leads into the idea of timing of point containers and timing of food, I think. Right. And you might have heard the term tempo used a lot by either me or Sceadeau or people in your home group, whether it's for Agricola or other games. And I guess we should probably clarify even more what tempo is. Tempo to me, in general, and you can pitch in with your ideas whenever, is kind of a bit of a sacrifice action now that doesn't help now, but it leads into a huge advantage later. So with the fences example Sceadeau was mentioning, when there's 1 of each animal on the board, the reason why that's the right time to do it is because nobody else can fence after you and then pick up the breeding pairs before you. And that fences action obviously doesn't do anything this round because you're not picking up 1 animal at a time. You want 2.
Right, and you're doing it, and you're not making big fences, right? Like you probably don't have 3 stacks of high society, but you probably don't have 15 wood.
Right.
You might have 7, you might have 9, but that's roughly the right number, right? If you're able to have 2 breeding pairs and breed at least one of them, good enough.
Right.
You can breed the other ones later, and some of them are odd, some of them are even, so you can figure out which ones you want to do.
Yes.
Based on number of harvests left.
That part's important if you want to mini-max your things.
Right.
Yeah.
But ultimately, exactly, you just want to go ahead and do it. And I often say tempo over efficiency. Efficiency is 15 fences with one action. Tempo is fencing at the right time.
Yes. And there's a huge difference. And tempo, when I first met you and we played our first game against each other, I mean, we knew of each other and that we were both pretty good at this.
Yes.
So we had a quick conversation about tempo, and you saying tempo over efficiency. And in my previous games at Play Agricola, like the month before, I had noticed a few times where I did a tempo move, and that created an efficient move later.
Right.
So I was telling you, tempo creates efficiency, right?
Tempo creates, and that's exactly true. That's exactly true. Is that you will be more efficient later, promise. Just get your tempo, just do the things you need to do, and do them at the right times.
Yeah.
Right. And just like we were talking about the whole, min-max with odd versus even animals, the importance of sowing in round 9 with 1 veg, 1 grain. This is something we discovered, I think, probably 2 or 3 years ago at Farmageddon, or something that I might have known innately, but I had to explain to other people. I'm like, if you sow 1 grain and 1 veg in 9, you're able to sow all the remains of that in 14. You have maxed both of those categories.
Right, with 1 grab of each, or if you're lucky, you have something easier than that.
Right. Well, yeah, now it's super easy to get those things.
Yes, the revised edition just throws crops at you. It's great.
Yes, yeah.
When I describe tempo to other players, I sometimes don't describe it in tempo. Sometimes it comes to me in a game as I want to race people to this thing or that thing. And if I describe Agricola as a series of races, I've done that a couple times. We all know about the race to first grow, right? That's the action tempo.
Right.
We race for the first fireplace. That's the first sheep grab tempo.
Yep.
It's all kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
And, the first breeding pair tempo is the first person to fence 7 or fence 10 or something.
Yep.
Yeah. It's all...
There's a ton of mini races in there, right?
Yes.
Race to the well. Sometimes there's a race to an oven, which you never want to be involved in.
It sucks.
Don't be in that.
And you usually lose.
Yeah. Don't expect that oven. It's not going to help you.
Yeah.
Multiple people don't want to be in ovens for their feeding strategy. That's not going to work out, even when they're throwing all the crops at you. Try not to make that happen.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so it is absolutely a series of races, and you have to pick and choose your fights. You can't win them all.
Mm-hmm.
Although winning the action advantage can help you win the rest of them.
Yes. The action advantage, the best part of the action advantage when you get up to higher levels of Agricola is that you use the actions to be sneaky and mean. And there's a lot of tactics in the game that we probably don't want to talk too much about because we'll just talk here for 4 hours,
Correct.
Which is too long of a video.
Correct.
So we're going to focus on strategy stuff, I guess.
Yeah.
So I guess the next thing I had on our list of potential topics, what I think was about the food tempo.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the first one you should probably get yourself really comfortable with in games because that is the biggest tempo that you will need to start winning a lot.
Correct. And ultimately, you've got it right there. Fish TP at 3.
Yep.
Right? So this is something that a lot of people fail to grasp innately. You might have, 4 food. Maybe you have 5 food. And you see 3 food sitting there, and you have a last action. Right? You look around the table, you see 2 people let like 2 or 1 food. Grabbing that 3 food is just going to make them scramble. And when they're scrambling and you're fed, the gifts you are given. The gifts you are given. Right? So just grab the food. Like fishing at 3 early. TP at 3 early. I don't care how much food you have. You're taking food for the next harvest. Great, you did it now. Right? Next harvest when everyone's fighting over the growth queue, over the rooms, or growth, and you're just like...
Or taking the clay oven to bake 1 grain that they never sowed.
That they never sowed. Oh, those poor people.
Yeah.
So those people, all of them are... They're action starved, right? Like they are taking mandatory actions that any player that is good enough to read a table can see, right? So you can just see, they're starving. I can just take all the things. I can leave those things so they'll get them back later because he has to go over there and take major minor or that guy has to go fishing, right? So having the food means, and this is why food engines are important too, but like starving the table of food is really powerful.
It can be really huge.
Yeah.
You can just win a game based on that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So after you have the food tempo done, the next thing in becoming a winning player in Agricola is once you've solved your food engine, can you grow the most? Or there's a spin-off of that, can you fence the most? I think of those as like a spin-off of each other because they're based on the same thing. And that thing is taking all the wood you can.
Correct.
Yeah.
Take all the wood. And this is one of those where do as I say, not as I do. I will take a lot of wood a lot of times, and there are some games where I'll take like 3 wood grabs total. Don't do that.
Right.
Don't do that. As you were saying, like you need about 1,000 plays of Agricola before you start deviating into some crazy junk. For the most part, wood is good. You take wood, they don't have wood. Wood is points.
Yes.
Wood is points in like 100 different ways. I think we calculated that if I had about 60 wood, maybe the 61st wouldn't be as useful.
Right.
But I need about 60 before I get there.
Right. Let's just try to count out really quickly if we do something absurd with our wood here. So let's build 3 wooden rooms at standard cost, that's 15. Let's fence out, that's another 15, so we're at 30 just there. 4 stables makes it 38.
38.
Max joinery puts it to 47.
Well, we want to eat each of those joinery things too, right?
Oh,
so,
yeah.
Obviously. So let's
that's,
add 5 more harvests, maybe.
Okay.
We won't do it in the first
Yeah,
harvest.
52 wood now.
Yeah, that's good. Oh, but we have miners, right?
Oh, right, the miners cost.
Right, I want to, all the good.
How about a swing plow?
I'd like a swing plow.
Yeah, 55 wood.
Yeah. Okay, and probably, who knows, you know what, I don't want to take grain, I'll grab a sack cart in there. And,
okay, 57.
Yeah. All right, that's good.
That sounds normal.
Yeah. Get that much wood. Can you get that much wood? I'm not sure the game has that much wood.
Yeah. Keep taking wood.
Keep taking wood. It's never wrong. Especially because what happens is people finish their fences. Like, oh, I don't need wood. You do. You need to take the wood from the other people. And you know what? You still have staples. Staples are still points. Maybe there's a joinery because no one should be taking joinery because it's bad.
Mm-hmm. Because it costs wood.
Because it costs wood, right, and gets rid of wood. You don't want to do either of those things. But if you're done and they're not, take their things.
Yeah.
Take their things if you can use them. And there are always more ways to use the wood.
Yes. I actually learned this lesson, well, I knew it before, I just was dumb and greedy. But at the World Championship semifinal, the player to my left was doing some really weird stuff. He had already fenced out. He had committed to 2 wood rooms for the whole game. And I passed on 6 wood probably 2 or 3 times to him. And he just like, yep, thanks. And he built stables and he maxed the joinery. And I think I came in last by a lot in that game. Funny how that happens.
Yeah, you're just like, oh, he's done with wood. It'll be fine.
Never do that.
Never do that. It's no one's ever done with wood. And if you think you're done with wood, think harder. Think harder. You should just take it.
Try to do the things we just threw out as possible ideas.
Possible things you could do with wood.
Yeah.
Right.
And probably in that order of importance to it. Except for the swing plow.
Except for the swing plow. Yeah, maybe one less
wood room.
Yeah, one less wood room to make sure I can get my swing plow going. And I probably don't need the joinery yet.
Yeah.
But yes.
And just from personal experience, some games can get really tight, and having 4 fenced stables, that's 4 points is a lot. 4 points, and sometimes that lets you get extra animals too. So.
And that's 4 points for you, and you're probably taking 6 to 8 points away from somebody else by having that 8 wood spent on your board rather than theirs.
Yeah. Yes. Wood is huge. Never ignore it, and grab the biggest pile when you can.
Grab the biggest, right? And so we've talked about that, and I think we have that on there somewhere. Is that basically what you want to do is you want to grab the biggest pile of wood, and sometimes you'll get distracted, right? Mm-hmm. Stone at 3 is perfectly fine early. And late, when you have a million actions, stone at 2 is fine.
Yes.
But stone at 3 is pretty much a standard thing to deviate away from, say, 4 wood, probably not 6 wood.
Yeah, 6 wood is maybe the premier action aside from family growing.
Yeah. And a lot of mistakes are made where people choose one over the other, depending on what's happening in their game.
Right.
But then we talked about how much clay is enough to keep you from getting wood. And the number is, all right, fine. Whatever that number is, all right, fine, I'll take clay. Because clay is the worst resource. Right, you need basically in EIK. I can't speak for Revised because Revised at this point I haven't actually done the math. But EIK, clay was food in some way. Not that you'd eat the clay like you could pottery, but clay would get you a fireplace, a cooking hearth, a clay oven, something along those things. So you need it a little in a tiny little bit, right? And then you use it and you're done. And you're going to need it to get from wood to clay, so you can get from clay to stone where all the points are. But other than that, clay is not terribly useful.
It just doesn't come up in things.
Right.
Yeah, it comes up in, well, the chicken coop is good, but that's maybe one miner that I want to play that costs clay.
And a granary, and now under ABCD, there's a couple of others that cost clay. But for the most part, the way that the game has been balanced is things are costed in wood because wood is so valuable.
Right.
So basically, the better the card is, the more wood it costs.
Yeah.
So people don't base it off grain because grain is clay. Clay is free, right? You can look at stone as like a point per stone, and if you can get more than that out of your stone, great. But clay doesn't really have a point value. It's a throwaway resource. If you see a pile of 6 or 8, and you can convince yourself that that's better than whatever you're doing, think again and then take it.
Right.
But
however, one exception I would want to point out that's a really good strategy because of wood is to take the pile of clay at its fine, because its fine changes your fourth room from wood to clay.
Correct. If you've got yourself enough reed that you can be building a fourth room out of clay is great, because you should be able to get it in large piles. If you find at your home game that you're not able to get it large piles, other things are piling up and your life is better.
Yes. You would rather just have 5 more wood than 5 more clay.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And you can probably win games if clay is starved at your home games. You can probably win games in wood houses just because that wood is going to fences and stables.
Right.
Or that stone is going to all the majors instead.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. The next thing I have on our thing here is just my categorization of how to teach the game to someone in a strategy sense. And we've talked about that already, but my ordering of things is food, then rooms, then diversify. And I don't know what your thoughts on that are, but I also have a point here that we might have skipped a bit in how to teach the game, basically, or how to improve people at the game.
Sure. So food and then rooms, right? So when I'm teaching completely new players, and I'm not talking about like people that are good at strategy, I'm talking about I have game nights, I have people of all skill level that come over to my house and play games. When I'm teaching Agricola, which is my favorite game, I want to get people into it, I tell them they have 2 jobs. One is to not starve, right? You're working on a farm, begging is shameful. So no begging. And rule 2 is make sure you grow your house. Learn how to grow the house, learn how to feed, don't worry about points, right? Start with that. Start with understanding that. Then you can worry about points for your farm, and then you get to go ahead and come back and work about other things. So for me, teaching friends, it was often offering challenges to them. I had a buddy who could do grain and veggie strats like no one's business, but he always scored like 30 points. Didn't have a whole lot of animals and never had any off-board points.
Right.
So I told him he had to play a game without sowing. He's not allowed to sow, and if he doesn't have more points off, if he doesn't have more than 10 points off-board, he automatically has lost the game. So get yourself 10 off-board points, right? And it took him a couple games, and then he got there, and his game got better, right? And some people have to tell them, pretend there's a constable in play. Sure. Right? Because they're too busy focusing on some of the side stuff. And I'm like, but you have to make sure your farm's good. And constable, if you don't know, no negatives for anything. Right?
Yeah,
so
it gives you bonuses for doing that.
Gives you bonuses for no negatives or anything. So just get points everywhere and go ahead and do that. I offered Lumin a challenge where he had to win a game without playing any minors or occupations.
That was fun. I mostly relied on over-tempoing everybody.
Over-tempoing. He started the entire table. They were all looking around like, where'd all the food go? And Lumin was just sitting there, grinning from ear to ear, not playing any cards. They didn't know that was his challenge. Yeah. He was just sitting there, the fireplace, all the food.
A basket maker's workshop.
A BMW. It was not good for them.
No.
So what I tend to do is I watch people play and figure out where their leaks are and try to give them a challenge to see what they can do.
Yeah. And the last challenge Sceadeau gave me this week was to only get 4 or 5 bonus points from my own cards, because I'm pretty sure he noticed I was just trying to do too much of that.
He really, really, really wanted, and we have cool pieces to get people to want to do things, right? So I didn't have it this year, but we have gold bars for 5 food. We didn't have any out. But like, it was like, that's a gold bar on fishing. Are you sure you want to turn that down? Like, you want to earn yourself gold bars. Yeah. In this game, we have little blue diamonds, little pretty blue diamonds for victory points. And Lumin always had just a giant pile, right? You can just put you can put those right by Lumin. Yeah. He can grab as many as he needs, and he throws out 1 or 2 when someone else does something.
Yeah.
I just wanted him to try to play a game where he was unable to get more than 5, because he wants to get about 30, right? If he can get 30 off-board points or 30...
And we'll talk about why I want that later. But
Right. And it's a challenge I'm going to have to issue the rest of the people because they hate off-board points.
Yeah.
So they're going to have to earn some more diamonds.
Right.
Yeah.
Get some diamonds.
Get some diamonds. They're beautiful.
Yeah, just to quickly go back on something we said earlier, and it connects to the blue diamonds and shiny gold bars. Your favorite new term is high society.
High society.
That's because the revised edition comes with markers of like 5 of something or 4 sheep. High society is the picture of 5 wood. You want high society.
You want high society. You want multiple stacks of high society. And the thing is that the game doesn't come with nearly enough resources.
Yeah.
So stacks of high society are required in order to play the game. So, but you just have them, right? And you just want to collect those markers. Those markers are so good. So that's what you want. Yeah, stacks of high society.
Right.
Yeah.
So that brings us to actually the next point, and it happens to be point ceiling. So why do I want those blue diamonds?
But you want the blue diamonds so that you can get more points than anyone else, right? There's only so many points you can get on the board.
Exactly. If we think about the best possible board you can make, let's just call it 5 stone rooms, 4 pastures. That means you need 5 or 6 fields. So that means you have 10 points from stone rooms, 15 more from people, you're at 25. 4 pastures is 29, and 4 points from fields is 33. Now let's assume you did good things with your point containers, and let's give you, I don't know, 10 or 12 more points. 43, 45 points. Perfect farm, right? Is 45 a winning score? Not always.
No.
Not always. So you need some support that doesn't make a pretty farm to give you a winning score.
Correct. And some of those points are obvious, right? You take stone, you build a well, great off-board points, etc. Everyone else knows about those too, right? And those are communal points. Those are points that you can take, you stop other people from taking them, etc. Bonus points are yours, and yours alone, right? If you have bonus points on cards, once you've drafted them, those are your points. Your job is to earn them.
Yep. There's not much more to that, I think.
No.
Basically, yeah. Take the stone to get your well or stone oven. Make sure that the game gives those, 15 or 20 points on the major board to everyone. Your job is to take as many of those as you can. And also draft enough cards that let you get your own personal supply of blue diamonds also.
Correct. And ultimately, you might not be able to do all the things on your cards, and if you can take all the majors from the game, then that's good enough. But if you can't get to them, you can augment it with your own blue diamonds. And getting your own blue diamonds, especially if they come with food, in Revised Edition, the blue diamonds come with a ton of food.
Yeah, they do.
Big Country is a huge example of that.
Right. But a classic example is the Lumin milking stool.
Yes.
Those are points that come with food, and those are beautiful.
Those, yes, yeah. Even in EIK, Loom and Milking Stool were absolutely great for that reason.
Right. All right, so now we've talked about a lot of stuff, but now I have a few questions that were given to me, mostly inspired by Chris Fung. Shout out to you, Chris. And these are more like theoretical. Chris Fung is not an experienced Agricola player, but he's a very strong gamer in other things, very sharp guy. It was great to meet you this year. So the first theoretical question that I really enjoyed and really challenged me, because I don't still quite know how to answer this, so that's why I'm talking to you about it, is how do we value the well? It's 4 points, it's a great point conversion, but is it a distraction worth doing? And when is it a distraction not worth doing?
Wow.
Right? Okay. Because there's a lot of stuff there.
There's a lot of stuff there, right? So it has all the things we like. It has 4 points. It is 5 food. All of those things are great. We like points for food. It is certainly at least 3 actions, or at least 2 actions, right? It's at least 3 stone. It's 1 wood.
That's like a third of an action,
right?
Maybe.
Like a third of an action, and then you have to take the action to go ahead and take the well. And maybe you rend into the well. Maybe you did other things, but it is the kind of thing that I'm looking at. If I happen to get Reedstone food 3 times in the first age, maybe then a quick well is amazing, right? Because that 5 food early is a lot of food.
Yes.
Which is much more than 5 food late.
Yes, stuff early always better than stuff late.
Right. So maybe I want that, but then again, if I have 3 stone and 3 reed, maybe the BMW is actually on the agenda much more than the well is.
Yeah, if you don't have a long-term feeding plan, the BMW is going to be so much better
so much better for you than the well will be. Correct.
The well will trick you into thinking you have a feeding plan when you really don't.
Right. So we call those crutches, right? Berry picker was a crutch, and the well food can be a crutch. Insofar that basically you're using it and it's great, and suddenly it gets knocked out from under you and you have nothing, right? Like you just had food, everything's fine. You look around, you realize you have no feeding engine, no plans, and you're starving. So you have to be super careful about things like that. The other time I'm looking at the well is when other people have stone, look like they're set up for it, and maybe they're set up to do things with it, and there's a 3 stone on the board, right? So I can grab the 3 stone, and now I'm basically daring them not to take the well with their next action. If they take the well with their next action, great, I have 3 stone, I can use this for other things. Stone converts at roughly 1 to 1, and on the well...
For a lot of reasons.
Right. And stone is slightly more on the well. It's slightly more than one to one for the points. And I will take it from someone else who looks like that is the thing that they needed and that was the thing they were going for. But I would say that my opinion on the well, it's great, it's large points, but there's a lot of times that I have planned for that stone that I cannot waste on getting a well.
If you have an early stone occupation, or a stone house occupation, I should say.
Like plow driver.
If you have a plow driver, let's just leave it at that because everybody knows the plow driver, I think. If you have the plow driver, you don't want to buy the well unless you got 3 reedstone foods in the first 4 or 5 rounds and you picked up the 3 stone.
Right.
And only then do you go for the
Only
well.
then.
But otherwise, that 1 reedstone food and a 2 or 3 stone grab, you got to renovate with that because that plow driver is really good if you can turn it on.
Correct. A social climber might convince you to go ahead and get a well, but maybe get the well when you run to stone and not when you go to clay because you don't want to slow that down. So really it comes down to, like everything, it's all about the tactical decision of is this right for me now, and what am I giving up to go ahead and take it?
Right. So I guess the moral of the story is the well is awesome, but don't get tunnel vision for it.
Don't get tunnel vision. Correct. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. The next question is about starting player, and some players have an issue with this starting player spot.
Hi, Ian. Sorry.
The starting player spot is a tactical, awesome thing, because if you can manipulate it right, you can get the action you want and the second action you want in a round.
Correct.
And you get a minor improvement.
Right. But if you time it just right, you get start player for the next round too.
Yes.
Right.
That's usually if everybody's starving. That's a great time to have starting player for free the round afterwards.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. But you don't want to be only doing one of those things with your start player action. You want to be start player to do 2 or 3 of the things that we just talked about.
Correct. So what I often say is don't start player without a plan for your first action next round, and don't start player over better things. Like some people will go start player to make sure that they can steal the 6 wood, when without the start player they get the 3 wood that they needed, stop someone else from getting the 6 wood, and continue on their way. Obviously, start player 6 wood is great.
Yeah, but it's never a super wrong thing to do.
It's never a super wrong thing to do, but like if you're playing a bad miner, or a miner that slows you down just to make sure you can do it, just grab your 3 wood and keep going. But that's honestly, it's the most obvious thing to do. If there's 3 wood and it's your turn and you're last to act, look for your start player action.
Right.
That's a great time to get it because you know exactly how you're going to start next round.
Yeah.
But start player in and of itself is actually like half action. You're actually falling behind by taking it.
Yes.
You're going to be ahead next round, which is great. But sometimes ahead on a round when the board's dry isn't helping you at all.
Right. And this is something that most players might not grasp if they happen to be behind in actions right now, that start player is just putting you farther in the hole. Unless it's to grow, then that's kind of obvious. You do that to grow.
Right.
But if you're behind on actions, that start player action is not fun. And if you notice this for your opponents, if you're the one in control of how many actions you have, you can kind of bank on those people behind on actions not taking starting player, else they're just falling behind in their own games.
Right. It's actually really amazing to see people take a lot of start players early and them not having the minors and refusing to take start player later too. So that's actually really funny, right? Like you want to time your actions. Like these are powerful plays. The taking of start player can be super powerful. There are some rounds where it's just absolutely right where you're going to need it. Sometimes you need it to stable block your opponent is going to build 2 stone rooms. Sometimes you need it because obviously, Family Guy or Plow So's flipping, and those are great.
Yeah.
But for the most part, there are times that you tactically want to have start player, and you want to have a mid-game miner to play at that time to go ahead and make that happen. And if you wasted a lot of early turns letting the person that's to your left get better than you, playing all your miners, you won't have it, and you're going to have to do a naked start. And naked start player can certainly be right.
Yeah.
It can certainly be right, but if you're doing it, you probably got yourself into that situation anyway.
Right. So I guess 2 quick echoes off what you're saying. The first is I often tease people who take start player and think on their first action, like, what did you just do?
Start player, and then they stare at the board. Like, no, when you take start player, you have to know what the board's going to look like.
Yeah.
And you should have a good idea what the board's going to look like.
Right, because 2 of the 3 things we talked about with start player, it's a minor, that's one thing. The other 2 things are, what are you getting from this board, and why do you want first and fifth action from this board, basically.
Right. Yeah, it's certainly fine to do it when the board's about to be juicy.
Right. So starting player, be very careful, and we'll talk later about drafting and why, or what to look for.
And what you're looking for
to make sure you can take start player at the good times.
Correct.
Yeah. So the next theoretical question I got was, what does our stage 1 look like? We only have 8 actions. What are we doing with those 8 actions? Well, we've already said get food and build a room, get a food engine and build a room.
We did say all those
So
things.
how many actions does that cost?
So if you're being super efficient, the food and room is 4 of your actions. Well, building the room is a 5th one if you want to do it, but it's 3 wood, 3 wood, 2 reed, and then fishing for 3, right? So that's half of your actions, just doing some of the basic things. And maybe you did 2 reedstone foods instead of the food grab and the greed grab. That's fine.
That's better, yes.
Yeah, that's better if you can just be given that, right?
And that means your 6th action is 3 or 4 food, fishing or traveling players, or it's taking clay, and your 7th action is build the first fireplace. That's also perfectly well and good.
But what about occupations?
Oh, we have those too.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people like playing 3 occupations in stage 1. And the problem with doing that is you end up not doing one of the 6 or 7 things that we've outlined for you to do in stage 1.
Correct. And if you're doing 3 occupations early, there better be a really good reason. And the really good reason isn't because you really want to play reed pond.
Yeah.
You could have just taken the 2 reed. Like, you need the reed later. Like, reed pond is perfectly great later. You don't need it now. But so you'll see a lot of people who are spending a lot of time setting that up. And when you see that, your job is to go, you know what, I don't need to play any of my cards. I'm going to take all the resources that they're leaving on the table.
Yeah. This has led me in many games to never play my 1st or 2nd occupation picks. Just my mantra tends to be go with the flow of the game, and this is one of the example of that. In stage 1, if I'm not being able to play the occupations I want to do, there's going to be enough resources to make it worth my time.
Right. Yeah. And if they're playing occupations that make buttons, it's even better for you. Right. So if they play an occupation that says when they traveling players or when they day labor X, great. Now they can day labor. Even field watchmen, the people that are going to play field watchmen and do things early with it, fine. They're taking grain, right? So the board is going to be juicier. My job at that point is to do what I need to do to get ahead of them so that they aren't so far ahead with the fact that they've plowed a couple of fields in the before the first stage.
Right. So in conclusion, I guess for stage 1, get your food, get your room. Don't over-ock. If you over-ock, then maybe one of those ocks was replacing the 4 wood, or was a 4 wood card, so it replaces a 3 wood action, and that gets a lot more reasonable.
Sure, right. Any of the ones that are well, they're called reeves now, right? They've like 3 different kind that are reeves.
Yeah.
But yeah, any of the 4 wood ocks can be super good.
Yeah, or any room saver to generalize.
Right, room saver, something that's going to give you a value of wood.
Yes.
Is perfectly fine. Or we've talked about Plowman. The dude that gives you, I think that's his name. He gives you 3 fields over the rest of the game. You have to play that in stage 1. Hut Builder was a stage 1 ox. Like, some of them are just stage 1 ox and you have to get them out. But, like, taking a single action to go ahead and do that isn't slowing us down from the 5 actions that we certainly need to take.
Yes, the absolute necessary 5 actions.
Right.
Yeah.
And people that, like I said, like, all of Agricola. So the problem is that I give advice and people then hear my advice and then they live by a mantra of my advice. And it's wrong. Yeah. Agricola is not played in a vacuum, right? So every time you're playing a game, you have to look and figure out what is right in this situation, because it's never absolute. Which is why I say, sometimes I'm not taking wood for a while. Don't do that. But if you can read the situation just right, and you can go ahead and leave it and still make things work, then that's fine. But you have to be able to read the texture of the board. And figure out exactly what's happening with the players you have, the cards they have, and the actions that they're taking.
Right. When you say texture of the board, I think of it differently. My term for it is the economy of the game.
Sure.
But we're talking about the same thing here. Maybe what I'm saying makes no sense to you, and that's why you should listen to Sceadeau right now. But if it's the reverse case for whatever reason, then if you think economically in terms of the game, you want to try to remember stuff in the draft and think about how many resources of what are getting added to this game, and if there's none of it, that's also noteworthy. Are there no early food occupations in this game? Are there no wood adders to this game? Is there going to be a bunch of reed in this game because there's a brushwood collector and a thatcher and whatever?
Clay roof, right, all those things. And knowing that is just really powerful.
Right.
Yeah, and that's reading the draft. That is learning the economy of the game. So for me, the texture of the board is slightly different than the economy. The economy you can certainly get through the draft. The texture is, as people take actions, what have they done? What kind of cascading effects have they made? What is happening on the board today, right now? But you have to know what people have in their hand. Like, I saw someone lose the game because they passed Roof Baluster, and they didn't think that anyone else could reno, and they were action efficient, and someone else was Roof Baluster and was able to run in front of them.
I made that same mistake last night. It wasn't Roof Baluster.
It wasn't Roof Baluster.
But I made that
Chimney
same
Sweep.
Yeah. So remembering the draft is important. Roof Baluster, for those that don't know, it's an occupation that you play and pay an extra food on top of the occupation cost, but you get as many stone as rooms you have. And if you think about that as a pure occupation, like what is the benefit of playing this occupation? You're like, okay, it's 2 food and an action, it's 3 or 4 stone, okay, whatever, it's not that great. The main reason it's great, and I guess we're spilling into draft stuff now, but it gives you the exact amount of things you need at the exact time you need, and there's a lot of hidden value in that tactically.
Yeah, so I come from a world of Magic, right? Like the first game that I played.
Right, you were a huge Magic player.
Right, I played Magic. I was professional Pro Tour scrub, as they were known. I made the Pro Tour a lot, made money occasionally. But basically, in that, when learning and teaching Magic, I said that there's 3 levels of it, and it actually feels the same in Agricola too. 1, understand that there's math, right? Understand that math exists in this game, and that you can make calculatable decisions, right? That's simple. That's the base level. 2 is do that math, right? Like understand that math is there and then do it, right? And the 3rd level is fuck up the math. That's what Roof Baluster does, the Chimney Sweep does, etc. Yeah. The ability to be sneaky and suddenly have something like, people are like, no one else can reno, there's not enough stone in the game, and you play that, you have fucked up the math. And that's your job, because people that are good are doing all the math. They're doing all the calculations, they know who can do what. So being able to change that math in some way is actually super powerful.
Right, exactly. I don't remember where we went on tangent from, but the next thing I have here is what is needed from an occupation to be worth a stage 1 action. Like, why are we playing these ocs? So we already talked about like the room savers and the things that give wood, because those are things you would normally be doing in stage 1 anyway. So if it replaces an action you would do in stage 1 anyway, yep, no problem, just go ahead and do it.
Right. If it's going to be augmenting an action, you're going to be doing a whole bunch. It's probably fine too. There's a new one that gives you wood and a food when you take wood. Yeah, that's fine. Go ahead and play that.
Yeah, do that one.
You're going to take a bunch of wood. Some of them have to be played early due to their tempo. Some of them trick you into thinking you need to play them early, like Sheep Whisperer. You don't actually have to play that one at all. But you're like, oh, I have to maximize the value. You don't. Mm-hmm. And you don't have to play it. But like if you do, it doesn't have to be stage 1. Right. So that is often what I'm looking for. I'm looking for something that's going to give me a large amount of food, or some really good amount of some amount of food or wood. Anything that ends in OOD is good in Agricola. So food and wood is kind of what you're looking for, or enablers that let you do things that other people can't do. I really like the assistant tiller. I think that's its name.
You plow when you take day labor.
Plow when you take day labor. Like, yeah, let me go ahead and just get my plows out of the way and get a whole bunch of food for stage 2, right? Yeah. This might set you behind. Like, you don't want to do that in exclusion of just taking room parts, which is how I told people they should be playing Field Watchman, right? You can take grain, just don't forget to take room parts. Room parts are still good. Okay. Right? And room parts are wood, reed, right? So large amounts of wood and reed are fine, but just taking day labor a whole bunch can be super good.
I guess, to put us on a tangent again,
we can't help it.
Field Watchman, I have a very hard time playing it without getting 3 grain into the ground in stage 1. I just say, screw it, I'll grow last, but this is going to give me a good enough advantage in food and other stuff.
It does. It makes me it incentivizes me to take 2 reed over, say, Reedstone food. Yes. Because I want to be action efficient with getting my room parts. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so you play Field Watchman and you take grain 3 times and you sow, that's 5 of your actions. Right. But
I'm not getting a room out. Yeah.
You're not getting a room out, not unless you somehow manage 6 wood and 2 reed. And if you get 6 wood, 2 reed and Field Watchman online,
good luck to your opponents.
Yeah, you're not losing that game. Yeah. Right, but for the most part, like, you want to snap pick 2 reed, and if there's like a 3 wood grab with your first action somewhere, go ahead and pick that up. But right, that's what you're looking to do. You want to make sure you keep still getting room parts, which was the nomenclature that we used, right? Room parts. And 2 reeds room parts. Reedstone food is not, because that's just not enough of room parts when you're doing
a bunch of other things. Exactly.
So basically, I either want things that are augmenting what I'm doing, or change my game enough that I need to do it immediately, like the Field Watchman.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, cool. Then the last theoretical question I have down here is how to play from behind with fewer actions. Because I think both you and me feel very comfortable when we're at 3 people and doing a bunch of farming things and everybody's racing to grow to 4 and 5 people. Right. But most players will feel kind of lost and that they've lost the game already.
Right. Right.
So I've never really tried to parse this. It's just kind of been like the result of some of my experiments. There was a month period in Play Agricola when I would just never remember to get a fourth room, and often I would lose those games, but it kind of taught me how to deal with being in 3 rooms. But I never actually parsed what those lessons actually were.
Right.
It kind of just turned into instincts. Do you have like any kind of...
Yeah, so basically, I try to teach people how to play well with 3 rooms, like to get yourself 1 room and keep going, right? You can win with 3 rooms. It's completely possible to go ahead and do that, but it requires the points and the point containers to make happen. So what you want to be doing is you want to be doing the things that other people are going to be struggling to do, because no matter how many actions you have, you're not able to get them in. And that's things like plowing, things like fencing, taking pairs of animals. Those things are just action efficient. Right? People who have 5 people, they have to take 1 or 2 stone with actions, right? Where when you're playing from behind, you have fewer actions. If in 5 to 7 you realize you're last in the growth queue, you don't have to try to struggle to like arm in a start player into a build room where you don't get to, like, you just don't have to do those things. Everyone else is doing those things, so your job is to take large piles of resources so you can turn them into the point containers later.
Right.
Like, feel free to get yourself out a slightly early plow if you can, and take major minor for it if you have to, right? Like, just your job is to go ahead and get the things in that other people want to do but can't do until late.
Right, and when people are doing growth, there's your 3 stone. Take that, build the well, because that's your point container when you don't have rooms as point containers.
That is correct, absolutely. Yeah, your job is to go ahead and take those resources and get them off the board. They're busy. They have to get themselves wood. They have to get themselves reed. They have to build rooms. They have to eat. Yeah. And they're too busy to grab 3 stone because 3 stone's not playing into their plans. Mm-hmm. So your job is to go ahead and grab it. They're going to have to pick up. They're going to have to do 2 stone actions late, and sometimes they're going to be taking 1 stone actions. Like, the 5th dude is totally not reasonable when everyone has it. Right? Everyone has 5 guys. That guy wants to be day labor, and there's 2 other people who want to be there with them.
Yeah.
Right? So if everyone has 5, the person with 3 is actually ahead. And you'll often see, and you see this all the time, right? Intermediate players, people learn the game, and the first thing they learn is that if I just build a bunch of rooms, I'm just going to beat my opponents because I have more actions than them.
Yeah.
As you get better, you realize, if I didn't spend that wood, I would be way ahead here.
Yeah.
Right? If I didn't spend that wood on that 2nd room, or worse, the 3rd room, I'm going to be way ahead here.
Yeah.
So one of the things I actually try to teach people is I actually have a right amount of wood for building rooms, and it's 6. If I can spend 6 wood on rooms, if you can do 2 rooms on 6 wood, that's fine.
Yeah.
But like, if you're spending more than 6 wood on rooms, understand that you're sacrificing something for it.
Right.
Right? But it allows you to play brushwood collector. It allows you to play carpenter and get 2 rooms in. It lets you do some of the funny things, but
so 6 is the number.
6 is my number for, if I'm doing more than that, I feel like I'm probably throwing things away.
Right. Which is why I will always tell new players, never build stables when you build your room. Just don't do it. Those stables are expensive. Sure, they hold 1 breeding pair if you build 2, but you just sacrificed 4 wood. And while it's easy enough to pick it up later, the timing gets real bad. The timing of those fences for you gets real bad if you build 2 stables.
Yep. Unless, because nothing's in a vacuum, unless someone's super relying on those sheep there and you have tempo on them. You have action advantage on them. And like, you have the advantage where you get to go ahead and build the room and a couple of stables, and you actually have time at the beginning of the next round to take the sheep before growing.
That works fine.
That's amazing. Right? Because, sheep sweeps are something that we're fond of around here. But if you're going to sheep sweep, you want to get some advantage other than 2 points.
Right.
So, that's something you're looking for. But again, stables are bad, especially 1. Don't ever do 1. That's just wrong.
Yeah. The EIK set has like 2 things you can do with 1 stable, but they're both in the WM deck.
They're both in the WM deck. Oh, that's fair. Okay.
Yeah.
1 stable is fine if you can turn it into a room.
Yeah.
I'll allow it.
Or 5 resources with the storage shed. So
yes.
Stuff like that. Yeah. But in revised edition, there's nothing you can do with 1 stable.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that kind of wraps up our theory stuff. And to conclude on how to play from behind, just be ahead in tempo on fields, crops, pastures, animals, right?
Right.
You might not be ahead on rooms, and that sucks, but you can be ahead on the other things, and you should go do that.
Yeah, and it's really amazing, too, if everyone else is at 5, where you can just last pick family growth without room.
Oh, yeah.
So good. So good.
Yeah, you make up those people points later.
You can make up the people points later, right? Yeah. So one of the things about playing from behind, I learned this playing 2 beginner players. Super beginner. Like, I got Reedstone food all 4 times. I was able to take 3 reed in round 5. I was flush with resources. And they were just farming. They were just farming. They were, like, plowing fields, building fences, and I'm just like, ha, 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 right? And then I had a struggle. I had a million resources. And then when it came time later, they had all the things, right? Like, I beat them, right? They're beginner players. But that's how I learned. I'm like, maybe there's more to this game than just acquiring large piles of resources and taking all the things, right? Like, they did the farming, they got their points. I was able to beat them in the end game because I had BMW and some of the other big things. But it was like, I need to learn how to play differently.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think we all have that moment, too, sometimes. You know, there's many ways to win this game, and there's a lot to be said for that.
There's a lot to be said.
That's one of the major reasons I think it's both our favorite game.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Just a variety of things you can do.
Yep.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we've skipped on your sheet here, because we've got down there, is actually drafting and how.
Well, yeah, I was actually
we're going to go to that next.
That's okay.
Okay. Yeah.
It does look like I skipped it.
It does look like we skipped it. Well, we can't help ourselves. We're just talking. Okay.
A lot of it boils down, unfortunately, to we know this card is good, so take it. Though I think there are enough things that we can teach people to look for to make that decision on their own, right?
That is correct.
So what I usually tell people in terms of what makes a good card to draft, does it give you wood, does it give you food, or does it give you points? And I was actually able to think about that aloud with somebody who asked me this week, and to like what levels of each make sense, right? Because I can tell you wood, food, points, but 2 wood and a point is not a good occupation. So what I think my answer ended up being was something like 6 or 7 wood relatively early, or a feeding plan for most of the game, or 4 points at the end of the game. Yeah. Those are all totally fine ox, worthy of a first or a second pick, I think.
Yeah, and 4 points is a good number, right? Because Chief's Daughter is probably 3, and it's not a first pick, but it's close.
It's close, yes.
It's close. Right, but it can be beaten out by other things. So yeah, I think that's actually a good way of looking at it. So as I've explained to Lumin, like I play by sense of smell, right? Yeah. So for me, it's what feels good, but those are the things I'm looking for. I'm looking for things that are giving me those things, freeing up actions, giving me free actions. I want free actions. That card, what is it, Confidant? Is that
card? Yeah, there's a revised Confidant. Yeah.
Card is so good.
Yeah, I did actually play it in a couple of my games on my channel. So,
okay, great. Yeah. So that card doesn't give you any of those things. It doesn't give you food. It doesn't give you wood. It gives you points, but it only gives you points that you could have. Right. But what it's doing is it lets you take actions for one action to take 4 well-timed actions.
Yes.
And maybe you only one of them is a food, but the rest of them are well-timed actions. Yeah. And there's something to be said about that, right? So things I'm looking for is I want ways to get things other players cannot have, which is one of the reasons why I'm a really big fan of like the Plowman or that Confidant or something like that. Is give me those things, right? Because I can look at those as bonus points, and that's kind of important, right? Like getting a free sow is giving me some number of bonus points, and the fact that it's in the ground and coming back up means I'm going to get more points off of that.
Yeah, it's anywhere between 1 to 3 points, or something like that.
Yep.
Depending on timing.
Right, and that card was super good too, to be able to start a player, build a fence, and grab a breeding pair.
Yeah, right there, tactically sneaky too.
Tactically sneaky as well. And what's funny is that like when we're playing here, Divergent, we'll tell people like, I'm going to be building fences. I can build fences or sow with that food. Don't forget that is something that can happen. Yeah. Make sure you plan accordingly. Although when you're playing in the tournaments, you don't have to say any of those words.
Yeah.
Right? You don't have to say any of those things. You just do your thing and then make it happen, and people go, oh yeah.
Correct.
Oh yeah. Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, so what I'm looking for is and we have a term called Agricola, where you're drafting cards that make you feel naughty. Right? Like you're doing all sorts of really good things. You have to be careful though, because if you play that way, you're going to lose. Yeah. It's the reason why everyone comes down from Agricola is because, I just have to take wood and read. Right? You don't get to play all these cards like you've got going off fireworks in your head. But yeah, the ability to do things that other people aren't able to do. If you plan on growing wide, like 5 people, you have to make sure that you have an extra space, something that is good for you and not for other people. So you're looking for cards that help you with that. Obvious cards that help for that is like Stone Toms.
Yeah.
Because that's like, I'll grab 1 stone at the end of the round, denying stone to other people, and get 2 stone. I have 5 people. 2-stone action that takes all the stone away from the board is great.
It's terrific, yeah.
Right? So things that give you your own personal buttons that other people don't want to touch are really good.
Right. So like fishing boosters is not something I would usually recommend you draft. But if you know you're going to 4 or 5 people way before everybody else, then you need to do something with those last people and taking fishing plus a grain or whatever the hell you're doing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that's one of the reasons why we really liked Harpooner early, is that when we were playing with the spot, everyone was growing, and it was a way for me to deny the table food, get a bunch of food, and get the rate I need to keep growing.
Sure.
You don't have to play Revised Agricola, even with that spot where you do the NER strategy, as you guys call it, where you just go big all the time. But because we were all going big, because we're exploring the space,
Sure.
Harpooner became a really important first pick.
Sure.
So it's gone down since because you don't necessarily need it, and Reed isn't necessarily as important.
Right.
And obviously BMW is still good. But basically, we took that card because it was extra food. You throw away the wood, but it was extra food and a Reed, and we found that we were more Reed starved than wood starved in those games.
Sure.
And for the most part, my recommendation is play everything. Take it, play it, even if it's bad. Like, so one of the luxuries I have is that I play a lot of games of Agricola.
Mm-hmm.
So I have the ability to play all the cards. Sequestrator, I watched you play it.
Yeah.
It didn't work out, but I watched you play it. And
It almost worked out.
It almost worked out, and Robbie said no.
Yeah.
So basically, feel free to take all the cards, right? Like, take them, play with them.
If it's not a tournament, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right, if it's not a tournament. Like, if you can get enough
Which is
reps
pretty
in.
much all games of Agricola. Yeah.
Yes.
Which is the follow-up to what I interjected there.
Right, right. So just you want to play, and you want to just experiment, play with them, find the things, and find the nooks and crannies of the cards. One of my favorite parts of the revised set is the fact that there's a lot of corner cards,
Sure.
that are corner case great, and most of the time bad. And then just playing with those cards and finding the value, and then finding the right time to go ahead and play those feels really good.
Yeah. I actually have an example here because I was talking with Andrew last night right before he left. And this whole experience has made me realize I need to find these corner cases because they can be fun. So what I realized is that by last night we had played all the games of Agricola this week. I didn't count them, but it was probably 30 or more. There's this really awful card called the Paymaster, where if somebody takes a fishing or traveling players, you can pay them a grain to get a point.
Oh man, I wish I had that out in a number of games.
Really? I just thought of one last night, and maybe the only time I would even try is if I had a field watchman.
Mm-hmm.
And I would get 4 grain down in stage 1,
Oh, yeah.
2 more in stage 3, and then play Paymaster and get 12 points for my 12 grain that I don't need.
Wow. Well, is it 1 grain? It's 1 grain anytime someone goes to one of those bad actions, right?
Yes, but you're making it a good action for them instantly, right?
So right,
it's
because
gonna
they're
keep
getting
on
grain, so people want to get in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's like the only situation I would even think of.
Sure,
playing it.
but it's still a card that you have to recognize and go, this is a situation where it would make it happen.
Right.
There are times when I'm like, you know what, I'm going to be plowing, and you don't know this when you're drafting the occupations, but there are times when you're going to be plowing and getting 2 grain or 2 grain in a veg or something in the first stage. If you can make that happen, that card then can pay off. Like, even if you're not making the action better, you assume that those spots are going to be taken on average 3 times a game, right? Each, right?
Yeah.
So that's like 6 points if you happen to have it. And if you're the first person to the oven, or you don't care about the oven, you don't mind giving them grain. Careful giving people grain before you have the oven if you need it.
Yes, I mean, and that's, well, I was just going to say, like, the market crier is really bad because it gives people grain. And this has the same effect. You're giving your opponents grain.
Yes. Yeah, and so Robbie actually ran into that because he played it. He played it in that seat, right? So he played it in the 3 seat, and the person in the 4 seat, the person in the 2 seat, when it came back around to him, who had no food plan, suddenly just bought an oven. He's like, oh, look, I can buy an oven. And it destroyed Robbie's game. Mm-hmm. And he's like, I shouldn't have tried there. I should have just taken a grain. Sure. Like, Rocket Crier, I've learned from Daniel Apolito, is not the worst card in the world. I hate it because I don't like giving other people grain. But, like, if everyone already has grain and you take it, it's just good for you.
Right, it doesn't matter. Once it doesn't matter.
Once it doesn't matter, that's fine. And, like, if you're super, like, you've got, like, a super good plow, or you've got some 3 fields and you want to just fill it up, and you haven't found Market Woman, you haven't found a good version of that card, then sure, you could make it happen. But, yeah, it's really bad because I don't like giving other players, like, giving everyone else 2 points. It's really hard to justify that.
Right, I mean, we've talked about doing the opposite of that all the time, right? Take wood away from the table, take food away from the table. give grain to the table? That doesn't make
That
any
doesn't
sense.
make any sense at all.
Right.
Not at all. Like, I don't even like the ale benches because it was giving them food. But you know what? That's still points.
Yeah, ale benches is more playable than Paymaster.
Yes, much more playable than Paymaster.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so I just had a number of games where I had such a good grain engine and no place to spend the grain. And that's why you're looking for those corner cases. You're looking for the corner cases, and if it can hit, you can go. And one of the reasons why you haven't really run into the corner cases much, and we have, is the way that you guys play on Play Agricola is 7 of 9. Right, which means you're throwing away the 2 worst cards every single time, and we draft 7, which means we're going to get a lot of those bad cards, and you're going to be staring at them and go, huh, I could do a thing right now.
Yeah.
Right, so that's one of the differences. We actually have a couple of different changes in the rule sets that don't change Agricola. Right, they'll change how each game is going to be played, but it's just kind of a slight variant. It's still Agricola. It's still the game that we know and love.
Right. And then that covers a lot of what we look for in Ox and Miners while drafting. I guess Ox, we haven't talked too much about.
We can talk about Miners are a whole different ballgame, so we can go ahead and discuss those. So what I'm looking for Miners is I'm looking for something. It depends on what seed I'm in, but I'm looking for something that I can play in stage 1 to take start player if it looks like no one else is going to. Like if I'm in the 4 seat, I want to make sure that I have something that I can play for either wood or free to go ahead and get in there.
Absolutely, but really quick, the way Shadow's home games work is that they determine start player before the draft.
Yes.
And in Play Agricola, we only find out after the draft. Though, as Shadow says, if you're in the 4 seat or even the 3 seat, you should have a plan to take wood and play a miner with your first 2 actions.
Right, so in Play Agricola, what you want to do is you just want to make sure you have those things.
Right, in case you're third or fourth.
In case you're third or fourth.
You kind of really need it.
Right, right. And that's certainly how we played before we said, why not know and have slightly more information. It probably leads to eventually having people bid for seats in Agricola in the final tables.
Possibly,
WBC,
yeah.
Right, just knowing all the information first is just useful in that way.
Mm-hmm.
But knowing what seat you're in is helpful for that. But not knowing just means you want to make sure you have yourself something free and easy. The new what's that thing called? It gives you a sheep now, and it converts.
Feed pellets.
Feed pellets. Like that card was it's free, right? Back in EIK.
Yeah.
And now it's like, it's free. Oh, and there's sheep, right? It's.
Yes, that's great. Round 1.
Yeah, I'll take one of them. Right? So, I guess I can't, take an animal later, but I don't have to. I've got myself my sheep in my house.
Yeah.
So, like, easy miners that do good things that make sure that let you have that when you know you're going forth and the board's going to be dry.
Yeah, that is always a useful pick.
Right.
I draft what I tell you very boring, right?
Yes.
I kind of feel like I cheat sometimes because I'm a nerd and I memorize a bunch of power rankings on Play Agricola for these cards, and that provides me eventually with intuition of what's good and what's not.
Right.
But sometimes I just go, this is a great card, I can't let anybody else have it. I'm happy to play it, so I'll take it.
Right.
Which is very boring. It doesn't make you think too much. It just, find memory, use memory.
Right.
Yeah.
And what I'm looking for is I do know the cards that are good, and again, I don't know anything about the power rankings, and the power rankings don't actually help because we're playing enough of a variant of Agricola that those power rankings are not actually 100% helpful. They're perfectly fine guidelines.
Yeah, but I do need to find myself thinking a lot about how this game will affect these cards that I traditionally think are good or bad.
Right.
I need to make sure each one is not a stupid thing to give to someone right now.
Correct.
Yeah.
But when I'm looking at those cards, I'm often looking at what can I take that's good, what can I take that's good for me, and one of the things that you learned in Magic is how to draft 2 cards from your opening pack, and that's something totally applies to Agricola as well.
Sure.
Right. So you look at your opening pack and you go, I know what I want to take, but what is going to wheel? What 3 cards in your average 4-player game? What 3 cards are going to disappear? So what am I taking when it comes back to me?
Right.
And then what information have I gotten when it comes back to me and either those cards aren't taken or those exact cards are taken? I know kind of where they are as they get played throughout the game. You know where other cards live.
Sometimes even round 2, then you know what somebody's doing in round 11, and that's terrific. That is terrific.
We did that in our final, right? Like you were able to figure that out based on his first turn plow. Exactly what he did and then where he was going for the entire game.
Yeah.
Well, that and cabinet maker. Anyway, so that's just standard drafting, right? But for the miners themselves, what I'm looking for is I want things that are good early. Same thing I want for the occupations, actually. I want something that makes sense early, something makes sense mid-game, and something makes sense late game.
Sure. To cover all of our bases here, in EIK, the thing is different, right? In EIK, you take the pawns, because those are points. those are food, and that's amazing with half an action or just coming with family growth.
Yeah, so EIK, the cards were unimaginative. Right? They were all just basic, here's some food for stuff, or here's, it was all really kind of boring and basic stuff. And the fun cards kind of came along, and now in the new version, it's a lot different. But you just take the pawns. Like, everyone's playing occupations, and it just gives you food. If you happen to play 4, now it's 2 points and 5 food.
Yeah.
What? So, like, yeah, no, you just take the pawns, right? Like, in EIK, you're looking for the things that cost no resources and give you points.
Right.
You're looking for that in Revised 2, but there's, like, one of them.
Yeah.
So it's very different, yes, EIK versus the Revised Edition.
Yeah. Revised Edition, what I look for is crops from my miners, actually. And I guess the generalized version of that is I look for the points that aren't printed on the card, but come in long term.
Right. It's actually super easy in Revised to draft nothing that has points directly on it. So you have to be really careful about it, too. Don't forget to look for the points.
Yeah.
You always want those. That don't cost too many resources, but they give you want the things that are going to give you the points in some fashion. Give you the crops is great.
Like feed pellets. 2
feed
points.
Pellets.
And an action.
Points. Right. Doesn't say 2 points on it, but it's 2 points. What's that grain one that gives you 3 grain over the next 3 rounds?
Oh, grain depot. Yeah, grain depot's a top miner. Yeah.
Hand cart.
Okay, I have a terrific story about hand cart.
Okay, all right.
So we found the context here is that during this week, we had some players that completely broke the hell out of hand cart. Hand cart, or hand truck, I guess.
Hand truck.
Yeah, hand truck is the miner. It costs a wood, and it says every time before you take a bake action, you get the number of grain equal to the people on accumulation spaces you already have.
Right.
So, like, if you took wood once and then you bake, you get a free grain. If you're on wood and reed, then you bake, you get 2 grain before you bake. Awesome. So we discovered that there's many ways to bust it, including oven firing boy of all things. And I looked back on the Play Agricola rankings because I didn't remember playing it much.
Mm-hmm.
Turns out, while we were playtesting the deck,
Right.
I had written a comment in the comment box in like over a year ago.
Okay.
Let's say October 2017.
Mhm.
That says, yeah, I think this can give too much grain. It's probably busted. And I proceed to forget about the card for a year, an actual year where it probably didn't come up in any of my drafts because there aren't too many revised games going on Play Agricola.
Right.
But it turns out I knew about it, and then I forgot about it. Now I know about it again.
Gotcha. But does Play Agricola not play? Oh no, they do EIK,
No.
WMF,
France, and G4, G5,
Right.
G6. Those cards hopefully will come out as part of Revised eventually. So
But it's different when they're playing in the context of
EIK,
EIK.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, just take the dudes with their arms out.
This is a hilarious tip from Sceadeau if we go roll it a bit back to what Ox are good.
Yeah. So back in EIK, when people didn't know what to draft, right? And I'm like, look, you're new. Just look for anyone who had their arms out, and you're probably fine. You're probably fine. Like Braggart, like adoptive parents have them out. Who are some of the other people that have their arms out?
Head of the family. I
Head of the
think.
family. He's got his arms out. They spread wide.
Yeah.
Yeah. Take ponds, lakes, and people who have their arms out, and you'll draft fine.
There's only one exception, Pastor, but
He did have. I think I said that, but not Pastor.
Yeah.
But you know what? If you're bad, Pastor's probably fine too.
sure,
Right?
sure.
Like if you're listening to my advice, Pastor is still on the team.
Yeah.
At some point, you'll be like, "Oh, it's round 10. I heard growing is fine. I should try that."
Yeah.
Pastor will work out for you.
Right.
People with arms out and lakes and ponds is
Yeah.
how you draft the IK.
So hopefully that gives you enough information to start feeling more confident in your Ox and Miners during a draft. And to quickly, I guess, touch back upon your wheeling idea that you got from Magic, what I try to do is try to remember. Well, I take one card out of my first pack, right? I remember 3 cards. I remember the top 3 cards in my estimation. And if they don't come back, then I know the 3 that are around the table right now. And if one of them does come back, great. Now I have one of like the first and third card that I like instead of the first and fifth.
Absolutely.
It of course gives me less information about the table, but I'm happier, so that's nice.
That's true. Also, if every card you wanted first came back, you're probably valuing cards wrong.
That's true too.
Like, oh man, which one of these I'm going to take? And you take something else and they're both back. Yeah, those weren't the right choice.
Yeah.
Like, unless everyone you're playing with is worse than you, at which point don't worry about my
Well,
advice.
yeah, the first choice might have been correct, but the wheeling
Right.
thing probably wasn't.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. And then the toughest thing about drafting for people is often, how do I get synergy? How do I create synergy? And in Revised, it's easy enough to say, well, these two things both work on the same action space. Bam. There's my button.
They label the action spaces. They
Yeah.
make it super simple for you to go, well, both these things say day labor, I'm in, right?
Yeah.
Or both these things say cultivate, I don't even know what that space does, but like they say that word, and like, okay, they'll work together.
Right.
But yeah, so we've talked about this, right? The synergy and combos, and sometimes people are overdrafting for combos.
Yes.
Especially around here, people that played Magic are certainly looking for combos too.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I just like taking the best cards. I like taking the best cards, and if I can find a card that feels naughty, that won't wheel, then I'll take that one, right?
Right.
Like, oh, that's going to be really good. When
If you already have a Scholar and a Plow Driver, you want the Hawk Tower, which isn't strong on its own, but gives you a free stone room in round 12.
Right. Yeah, things like that, right? So you're looking for synergy, but you don't necessarily have to draft for synergy. You should be drafting, I'm just going to take the best cards. You want to be flexible.
Right.
You always want the ability to go in some direction that is against the grain, but is giving you tempo in some way.
Right. Oh my gosh, I didn't even put flexibility in this section. Oh my gosh, we have more to talk about. Wow.
Yeah.
To not just go for buttons in going back to synergy though, it's not just about pressing your button on fishing. It's about filling out your farm, because it's almost impossible to do all the pretty farm things without support on almost every section.
Correct.
Right? You need to have cards that help you plow. You need to have a card that saves you some wood for either rooms or fences. You need to have a card that gives you crops or animals.
Right.
Like, you need all these things, and don't draft fishing stuff over and over again just because you have a fishing spot.
Oh, yeah, no, don't do that. No, I've certainly seen a whole lot of excessive synergy.
Right.
I think you said it out loud. Like, if it takes you 6 cards to make a button good, that you shouldn't have done that.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And in stage 1, if you spent 3 stage 1 actions making a button, that button better be good.
It better be amazing.
That better be giving you a room, a field, and 2 food at once.
Oh, yeah. That's a good button.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like, just be careful of the over synergizing but like, obviously, it's also important to have a plan, right? So this is one of the things, again, I'm going to talk Magic a little bit. People would sometimes just draft the best cards, and their decks, when they're playing draft, weren't the best, right? They had a whole bunch of super late game cards because they're all good, and they lose the early game.
Mm-hmm.
So you want cards that help you get to where you're going, right? And when you draft Ox, you kind of know where you're going. And now you're looking for miners that help you get there, that will accelerate your game, that give you those crops early and things along that nature.
I actually never thought about it that way. I always treated Ox and Miners as like they happen to be different sets of cards on different action spaces, but I'll just try to make my plan.
Mm-hmm.
But that's actually very interesting insight. So you're saying that Ox give you your long-term strategy, and the Miners are boosters for that
The miners
to
will
make it happen.
Exactly. They're my enablers.
Okay.
So they're the things that I'm looking for. And especially, like, if I have 2 different kind of lines that I can imagine with my occupations, then the miners will help me kind of decide which direction I should be going.
Sure.
Right? And that's one of the things that I was doing when I was puppeting people. So when we play here at Farmageddon, I'll often not be playing, and I'll be shadowing people and kind of talking to them. The first game that I kind of walked Ryan through to his victory, it was, these are the cards you have. This card right here, it was the plow for grain. Like, that card's just stupid good anyway. But like, that card really enables you to do all of these things in the first stage. You have these 2 occupations that are going to make this super good. Let's go ahead and kind of focus on getting this and making this happen. So it gave him the enabler that he needed in order to kind of super boost his game. So that's just what I was looking for. I was looking for things that boost it. Obviously, we just take all the good cards, that's fine. Memorizing power rankings and knowing the best cards mean that when you're holding them, they're flashing in your hand, right? Like,
yes.
You can just see them, you're like, okay, that one and that one.
That one screams, take me.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And I have that through reps and through intuition, but I'm also looking for that kind of synergy or the things that turn on those cards in my hand.
Right. Okay. That's really cool to hear. I guess we have to address the thing that I didn't write down, which is flexibility, and you talk about it a tiny bit already. And that's, you can imagine yourself with 2 or even 3 or 4 different lines based on the 7 Ox you have.
Right.
And in my experience, the games where I draft flexibly, so I can choose this path or that path during a game depending on what my opponents are doing, those are my best games, because I can just sit there and react to what people are doing and have a fine game, whatever they do.
Yeah.
And just that flexibility being able to be fine no matter what, that's great. And if you ever studied game theory, that's just game theory.
Yeah, so, and again, basically, it's one of the things that I recommend so when we're playing here, one of the things that people often see me do is I'll just gather a large amount of resources and not go one direction or the other.
Yes.
And that is a hammer for other people. They're like, okay, I want to grab that 2 stone to grab the well, but if I grab the 2 stone, dude's going to grab the well, or I want to set up the pottery, I want to play ceramics, and I want to get pottery, but he has the ability to steal the pottery. And just having that in your back pocket means that people are now, like, they know you can react to them, and they have to play differently. When you have the cards in your hand, they don't necessarily know, but you can still react to them.
Yes.
And being able to react to what people are doing to take their things, or just do things better than they are, or ahead of them, is just super important, just super valuable. And the flexibility of having all the resources, or the flexibility in draft will help you with those things.
Yeah. So if you can figure out how to line up a few different options for your game during the draft, that would be optimal, in my opinion.
Don't paint yourself into a corner.
Yes. Painting yourself into a corner usually results in a score of 32, approximately.
It's true. Like, if you make yourself, you spend 6 actions on that great button, and someone else has a card that makes it slightly better for them, and they just take it because they can, like, your game is just done.
Yeah.
Right? So, and that's painting yourself into a corner. And some of the other things we haven't talked about is don't be greedy.
Yeah. I guess I didn't put that in here.
We didn't put that in there. No, like, don't be greedy. And I've changed my play, or I've adapted to the punish line, which is just game theory in general, which is if you get greedy and you take things that I wanted, I will take the things you should have taken, and I will make you sad, right? Like, we could both play this game so that we're both doing well, but if you get greedy, then you have to be punished. Eric set himself up to get punished with 5 beggars, but he had to do it, and it was right, and man, it was close. But yeah, so basically it's just, you can play risky, but know what you're doing.
Right.
And if you're behind, like, not just behind in actions, but like you think you're behind in the score, you sometimes have to play to be greedy.
Right. Actually, I would say if you're behind in actions, you can't play too greedy. But if you are behind in score by a lot, your opponents might know this too and not care.
And not do the things to block you.
Right.
Correct. Yeah, sometimes people will gift you things if they can do the score, figure out scores in their head. So.
Yeah.
But yeah, don't be greedy. Don't be too greedy. If you need the 3 sheep, just take them. And we also talked about the action, the tempo of that, where like 3 sheep last action is so much better than 4 sheep first action.
Right.
Right. So you just have to understand all those things. This game teaches you everything about all games, right? Understanding why last action X is better than first pick X is just really key. It's just super key. And if you box yourself into a corner and you have to first pick X, people are going to take advantage of that.
Right. Either by taking start after you take X immediately or something else.
Right.
You are a lot more experienced as a gamer than I am. I only know maybe 10 games decently, and you have this wall of 100 right here. So I'll let you be the lone expert in this conversation on that.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's just these are things that are just useful overall strategy things you discover. And yeah, I mean, a lot of my ability to be good at this game is the love for the game and how many reps I put in.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, and me too.
Yeah. If you love it, play it. Find people to play. There are sites to go play it on, etc.
Yeah. The last thing on drafting before we go into the sites to play it on is hate drafting or de-drafting, whatever you want to call it. Sometimes you realize your neighbor has stuff that enables a card you have in your hand. Doesn't do anything for you. For you, it's a blank card. That's one of your terminologies that I'll be using.
Yep.
Blank cards. For you, it's a blank card, but if your neighbor gets it, the game's over. So, obviously, in that case, you take the blank card, and you're saying, I'm going to fight for this win.
Right. And what's really funny is that the hate drafting, right, the de-drafting, defensive drafting, is something that you do because you're like, all right, I passed this card, and he should have taken it. My right-hand opponent should have taken it, left-hand opponent, whichever way you're drafting. And I want to stop it. Right? Like, this card just enables that card. And there's always a non-zero chance that the card that you're stopping comes back to you. And now instead of you stopping the thing, you now have the thing, which is great. Right? And this card is blank. This card is worse for you than some of the other cards in the pack. But you want to make sure that they don't all go to the same person because you're like, well, I can't win if that guy has all those things.
Right.
So that's one of the reasons why you would hate draft or de-draft.
Right.
And after all the ox have gone out and you know what's out there, you'll see it in the minors too. You're like, I can't let this go because this is too powerful in somebody else's hands.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't first pick D-draft unless my cards were weak, because I still want to enable my game, and I hope someone else is being responsible, as we call it. But from second pick on, I'm certainly looking at the possibility that I might have to D-draft.
Really, that early?
Yeah.
For me, it's a bit different. I only usually do it in the obvious cases where I have 3 blanks. I might as well take the blank that stops someone else.
Sure.
Or if, the first situation we talked about where this is going to win the game for someone. Otherwise, I'm tempted not to D-draft, but I know my memory is pretty good, so I get to rely on those probably a lot.
That is fair. But one of the benefits of D-drafting, and I had this accidentally happen to me in a semi-game a couple of years ago. One of the benefits of D-drafting is the fact that you can redibs something. So one of the things that we say is like dibs, right? You take first fireplace, you got dibs on the sheep. You do some things, you have dibs on it, right? Like you made fishing good, dibs, I'm going to keep it low. But if I drafted a card that's good in the fishing spot and you're taking fishing a lot, I can play it to force you to do your thing earlier than you want to, right? So the hate draft can be played like it gives you something too that maybe like it's not necessarily the combo, but it's good enough for me that I force you to be responsible.
Mm-hmm.
And forcing people to be responsible means that you're going to have better actions. And if they're not responsible, you just be like, well, I've made it good enough that I can go ahead and take this from you.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, so I think that covers all the drafting stuff. Hopefully you've learned a ton from our conversation, but I think we've learned a lot from each other too, not only in this conversation, but throughout this week.
Just throughout this week. Well, it's actually kind of funny, right? Because Lumin wrote down all the things we're going to talk about. We've never discussed any of it.
Yeah.
So it was completely possible that we would have been going in different directions. But, we kind of got here through a lot of plays, right?
Yeah.
So we kind of know what's up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, with the game. But
yeah. For my end, I know that I've learned a lot how to even have a more flexible start, because like we've said, there's a lot of ways to win this game. And some of the plays I've gotten this week have shown me that I can just do nothing for 5 rounds if I set things up well, and then I'll still win.
mm-hmm.
The things have to be really good, but it's still really possible. That same example where I have to choose when I'm family growing with childless, that was the key. Like,
Yeah.
I can start off this game however I want.
Right.
But let's choose the one that's not super greedy.
Mm-hmm.
Let's choose the one that's guaranteed good, and let's go.
Right.
Yeah.
And Lumin has a lot of discipline in the, I'm going to take things that are good, I'm going to play things that are good, and I'm just going to do good things, right? And I tend to, and the people that play a lot with me tend to as well, sometimes get slightly distracted with really cool things, when you could just take the boring things and do fine, right? So the dedication is the wrong word, but the ability to go ahead and just stay on target and do just what is good, do what is necessary just to make things happen. I think one of the things that you brought to the table is people have seen me do early plows, but they've always seen me do it in tricky ways.
Mm-hmm.
And like you're just like, whatever. It's action. It's stage 1, 3rd round. I'll just plow. Like, and that's raising their eyebrows. Like, what is going on with this? Because I will plow early, but not necessarily just a random plow at that time. And like your persistence in just doing the things that are good, because you imagine what your farm's going to be, is really good. And also, you also brought a whole bunch of B-Deck experience to the table.
Sure.
We just got the cards like a day before Farmageddon. I actually took them to scan them into the TTS app like a day before anyone got here.
Okay.
So like I hadn't seen any of those, and you'd played some of those cards and some of the A cards in ways that we hadn't seen yet.
Right.
So it was really cool that you just brought a different understanding and a different, because you'd seen a lot of reps of those where we have started later than you, and you were able to go look at all these cool things that I can do.
Right.
Right. So you did awesome, cool things that we hadn't gotten to yet, and you also just
You definitely would have gotten to them.
Eventually.
You pushed things a lot farther than I would be willing to.
Yeah. Right. I don't care about losing, and that's really important. Like, you have to not care about losing in order to explore the game.
Sure, yeah.
So just see what happens. If you don't do X, see what happens. Ian tried the starvation strategy. That will never win. So I'm not sure I'm a fan of trying that, but like everything else, go ahead, try it out. Don't be afraid to lose. Don't be afraid to experiment.
Yeah, when you're learning the game, learning new cards, that's absolutely the right way to go about it.
Yeah. Tournaments are different.
Yes.
Tournaments, play the cards you know, or play the good cards.
Yeah.
But don't be afraid to experiment. Don't be afraid to lose. So yeah, we would have eventually gotten there, but you certainly kind of accelerated that game for us. and you'd mentioned that you were really surprised that it was just nothing but revised. I guess that's because Agricola players prefer EIK, right? Like,
yeah, all of you watching, like 2 of you know revised. Everybody else knows EIK.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I embrace new things. I like new things. And I just think revised does things really well. It was scary at first with the, wow, all the cards just give everyone all the food. What's the point of this?
Oh, they let Caravan into the game? Oh.
They
What
totally
are
did.
Yeah.
They threw food into the game, and then they also threw Caravan straight in.
Yeah.
Just right in there. Caravan is the reason why I decided the spot had to be the thing that they play tested with. That was my decision.
Okay.
I'm like, there's no way they thought Caravan was a good idea unless that spot existed. And I thought that spot made sense back in Caverna, right?
Okay.
Like, oh, look, you can grow starting in round 1, even though you can't in Caverna. Like, and I thought that was him growing as a designer because you're not constrained through this tiny little pipe.
Okay.
But like Caravan, I'm like, there's no way they didn't play with that because this doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, every card feels like, what is Caravan doing here?
Yeah.
Oh, they made it cost 3 food. Yay. Wow, yes. Caravan.
Right.
So I've gotten off track. But yeah, the things that I learned from Lumin is just the persistence and the just taking the good things and doing all the good things.
Yeah.
Like Lumin could certainly, giving him the challenge of winning without playing cards is actually something that he could probably do on his own. He knows how to play that family game really well, and he augments it with the cards that give him points or that let him do it slightly better.
Yeah.
His stuff is not necessarily tricky, other than the big country stuff, but your stuff is really just solid play.
Yeah.
And
I don't think I can win against play Agricola level opponents with anything else is probably why I ended up this way.
That's fair.
Yeah.
And like you did really well early. It was actually really fun to watch. Is that Lumin did super well in Farmageddon early, just lots of firsts and seconds, and then like
People learned.
and people learned quickly. Like, all right, I'll just try the boring things. Oh, look, they work. Right? Like, stop trying to be too fancy. Like, don't watch me and then try to do the things I'm doing. My stuff is weird.
Yeah.
And I can still just play like that, right? Like, if I have to, I can go play boring and do those things
Right.
and take the boring cards, and that's fine.
Yeah. And in addition to what I've learned from you, it's not just like how to like in the game like change up your starts and change up your finishes and all that. But the most important thing you taught me is how to make this game fun for a lot of other people, more than I already try to do. Because my previous thing was like, I'll try to have fun talking to everybody, making it social, trying to joke around.
Right.
But you have given me the ability to say, try this play style to my opponents, like make this fun for yourself and let's go.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have been issued a challenge. Go do this thing and see what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some of the other things we do with new players is I'll handcraft starting hands.
Okay.
All right, so I'm going to give you the grain button. I'm going to give you 7 cards that all work on grain. You figure out what you do with them.
Yeah.
Or I give someone else, you have all the animal cards, go do that. Animal and fencing, right? So I'll give people all sorts of things when I have no cards. Go, okay, let's go play that, right? And everyone's having a great time because they've got a button that does great things. They don't know the game doesn't have that built in, right? So it's important for me to try to get new people into the game, and that's why I play with the spot more than anything else. Is I think it's more fun for new players, and I want more. I want to grow the game. I don't want the game to be an elite group of people that just sit around and play because we will shrink in numbers. Because when you have an elite group of people, someone's always the worst, and when you're the worst, you don't want to play anymore.
Right.
So you shrink your numbers. So you have to get people that are going to come in and have fun.
Yeah. And I mean, I want to grow the game too. That's why I asked you to make this video.
Sure.
Yeah, hopefully people from weird places, when I say weird, just not America.
Those are all weird.
Yeah. So if you're watching this from faraway lands, thank you. We appreciate it. We hope you learn stuff and have fun playing this game.
Absolutely.
And where do you play this game? To start off, most players will play on a French website called Boitejeu. It's a great resource if you're starting out in Agricola. It's the EIK decks with a few things missing, but it gives you a very good ladder to play on. It has a ranking system, so you have a general idea where you're at. Don't rely on the ladder too much. Don't care about points too much. But it gives you a really good way to learn the game asynchronously, which means you're playing one move at a time and checking your computer the next day or the next half day. And that lets you get time to think about what's going on when you take 4 wood or starting player in round 3. It gives you the time to let you figure out what's happening. Once you get super experienced, or if you want to play with experts just for the challenge of it or to become one yourself, that's what I accidentally did by going to play Agricola. The interface does take some time to learn, but there are tutorial videos on this YouTube channel that help you a lot. And if you want to play revised, there is a way to do that.
Right. So right now it's super sketchy how you're going to be playing that. Right. So Tabletop Simulator is a game where it's basically just a board and a physics engine, and people can do that and do mods with it. A friend of mine took some of the basic Agricola mods. Daniel Polito took the basic Agricola mods and made a good, solid Agricola game out of it. I took that and modified it so that it would do revised things and a little bit of automation to kind of have fun with it. But it's absolutely really good, and we play revising that on a regular basis. So what we do with that is I've created the mod. Anyone who's friends with me on Steam has the ability to download this mod and play it and either host servers with their friends or whatnot. Eventually, maybe it gets released in public consumption. I'm worried that eventually, someone at Agricola is going to go, I don't want this on there, and then they'll delete it, which is why it's like friends only, but it's friends and others. Matter of fact, I posted on Reddit that it was a thing and people could friend me, and people have friended me and taken it. Some of them have given it back to me like, hey, I added this code, is that cool? I'm like, yes, take that, upload that, that's great. But we get to play Revive on there. I just scanned all the cards in. My scans are slightly askew. It's not pretty. It's kind of like early play Agricola stuff, where the cards are like, this one's bigger than the others, and the font's a little bit weird.
It still works, though.
But it still works.
A game.
You absolutely can play it, right? And we play it on a regular basis. I've got a little channel. We have a Discord server. You actually, if you download the mod, it tells you what the Discord server is in the notes of the mod. So you can go ahead and join there. And there's people in there that want to play Tabletop Simulator and want to play Agricola. And basically, that's it. There's probably going to be a dedicated Agricola Discord channel that I can just go ahead and kind of post in there, because the other one is more general.
Okay, yeah.
But so the people can go and get together, because right now I just have a bunch of people that message me, and I know they friended me just for the mod, so I'll ping them and go, hey, I need some more people, right? Like, one of the things that I do, if you take a look at my Twitch stream, is you're going to see some of the videos that I've done where I'm just playing the Tabletop Simulator. If you watch the old ones, you'll see how much different the interface is from now, where it does all sorts of cool things. Your resources fly to you when you put it on the board.
Okay.
If you put it on the board in the wrong spot, both spots resources fly to you. It's a bit of a dexterity game. Yeah, it's not perfect. But it lets you get a bunch of reps in with Revised, especially if you don't own Revised, or you don't have people that want to play Revised. We can have kind of a community of people that are willing to go ahead and do that.
Right. And I would suggest you do that on Play Agricola too, though for now, most people are still in the EIK sets. All the cards are there. If you have your home group and for some reason like Play Agricola better, it's there too. But Shadow's version will probably be the more community-driven one in the long run for now.
I mean, that's my plan, right? So that's certainly what I'm looking for. Play Agricola, it's overwhelming. You want to play yourself a solo game. Your video on how to do things in it is actually really good. I watched it, and it kind of helped me refresh my memory on how to do things, and I thought that your tutorial was great, and like that was one of the things that made me go, okay, yeah, you have a love of this game, right? Like if you're willing to teach people how to play Agricola, that is a love of this game, and that's really important. So Play Agricola has, if any of you ever played on Brett Spildwell, which is ancient, BSW, it had a bit of a sharks don't like newbies kind of feel, and Play Agricola has a little bit of that too, right?
It has.
Matter of fact, you've said, you look at people and you go, oh, if you take longer than 45 seconds to turn, I don't want to play with you because I want to get quick reps in.
To be fair, it only takes 5 solo games to figure out how to be quicker than that.
Right. The recommendation is get on there, either play with some friends or play some solo games so that you understand the interface, so you can then interact with other people.
Yeah.
Play with the good players and understand what's going on and play with them, and that's fine. It's just make sure you learn the interface before you smash your newbiness with other people. So either solo games or find some friends that are also willing to learn.
And there are plenty of people on Play Agricola who are really nice. I think it's 98% of the people on Play Agricola are great, and the 2% that aren't are yelling everywhere on the forums, and that's what you see. So,
right.
Yeah, don't be intimidated by the people. We might have a lot more experience than you, but most of us are totally fine playing with you. Just don't take 2 minutes to like try to take a grain.
Or people will be sad. Right. Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah. So I guess to wrap the whole video up now, this is a lot longer than I thought it would be actually, but we've covered a lot of ground. We hope that you've learned stuff from us, or at least enjoyed this conversation that we've both thoroughly enjoyed.
Yep.
And I can't thank you enough for inviting me over here to experience this week here.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, this week was great. Having you here was great. Your ability to teach them the people that frustrate me, because I've lived with them forever, is great, right? Like, you have a patience with people, and you have a different way of teaching than I do. And watching you kind of explain things to people and using very different words than what I use, and watching it stick for some of the people is just really good to watch too. So, like, I really am glad that you came. I'm really glad that we got to play this way, and I'm sure I will see you next year.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for watching, and I don't know when my next game video will be, but hopefully soon.
All right.
All right.
All right.
Later.
Salud.